Hello and welcome to the AI Business Leadership Podcast, where we speak to business leaders about all things artificial intelligence. I'm your host, Laura Nelson, Head of Product at SolvedBy.Ai, and today's guest is Jeff Watkins, Chief Product and Technology Officer at xDesign. Hello, Jeff.
Hello. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Great to have you. So Jeff is a technology leader, a tech blogger, a public speaker, and a technical architect with over 25 years experience in the IT industry. Today, we're going to hear about Jeff's journey into leadership. We're also going to talk about how businesses and organizations can best use artificial intelligence technology in ways that add value, are compatible with their employees and their customers, and that are secure. So thanks very much, Jeff, for joining us. Could you just first share with our listeners a little bit more about your background and what brought you to your current position as Chief Product and Technology Officer at xDesign?
Sure. I mean, I think I've heard of so many different stories, of course, people, different walks of life, how they got into tech. And I'm one of the few lucky people who, from a very young age, knew I wanted to be in tech. I first started coding when I was 6. Started programming BASIC on a Commodore VIC-20. I'm not sure many of the listeners will remember those machines anymore. That's a long time ago, so 40 years ago now. And all the way through, that was one of the things that kept my interest. And this was before the tech boom had really happened. So really, I was doing it out of the love of it, and I didn't know if there was actually going to be a proper career in it. And certainly at the time, people weren't pushing tech careers. So when I first, then I went to university, and by the time I come out of university, the web boom was starting to happen. So then the whole thing took off, and I've spent the last 25 years or so in consultancy. I started with a company called BGSS, who are now a big multinational consultancy, and when I joined them, it's only 23 people, and they're now several thousand, so it's really interesting to see them grow. Then moved to about 5 years ago to a company called Ant Digital to be their chief of technology. Again, they were about 300 when I joined and about 1,000 when I left. And then 2.5 years ago, I joined xDesign as the chief product and technology officer. About 150 people when I started, and now 500 plus. So I've seen a lot of growth in my time in my tech career. And but what I've never really moved away from is having an interest in tech. Keeping my hand in some way, as a CTO of a larger company, I really can't be super hands-on writing the code on a day-to-day basis, but I still do keep my eye in. I'm currently doing a master's degree in artificial intelligence. I completed a master's degree in cybersecurity last year. And both of those do involve some tech hands-on practice and building things, which just keeps me sharp and keeps me understanding what people are doing nowadays.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you mentioned you're doing and done a couple of masters, one of which is in artificial intelligence. What was your first kind of venture into that world of artificial intelligence then?
So that was a few years ago now, and it was looking at diary and schedule management and resource optimization. And I thought, well, it's an NP hard problem. It's completely an n factorial time for those who like to nerd out about that kind of things. It's a very hard problem, and it's the kind of problem you can really only efficiently solve with a heuristic, with something that's going to be something like an artificial intelligence. And we were doing a tech demo for, I believe it was the HMCTS, and we did it for a couple of other companies as well, looking at resource optimization. And that was my first dabble into it, using some libraries that were built, open source libraries that were built. And I thought, this is really interesting. But then that was still during the time when we were kind of having one of our AI winters, and there wasn't a lot of ask for it. At the time, people were starting to more ask around things like APIs and mobile, and tech comes in waves. So there was a kind of a big gap between doing some of these tech demos and doing some of exploration, and then actually, when the late 2022 stroke 23 happened, and everybody was suddenly very interested in the topic.
So, and I think that's remained now with it being a very high point of interest for businesses. So you, in your kind of role as a technology leader, as a product leader, what are the key things that you would consider when building AI solutions or solutions that incorporate AI?
I'd say it'd be the same for anything. We're talking about blockchain. I think anything like that. So blockchain is another good example of a tech buzz, something that was a hype cycle, and people will put blockchain in this and like, well, start with a problem. Don't just build tech in search of a problem. Figure out what your and then when I say business value, I mean expected business value. Because it's really hard to, or almost impossible to see the future. But what's your expected business value from this? And that might be, you might be saving money by creating internal efficiencies. You might be improving the user experience. Octopus Energy did that when they started doing sort of automation with an agent in the loop. The customer satisfaction went up from 65% to 80%. So looking at, well, what are you trying to improve or increase, or what you're trying to decrease? And, some of these things are removing manual errors, improving quality. And it really, so we've built a scorecard around this, and we look at, well, what's going to be your return on investment and what you're actually trying to do that brings about that expected business value. Because without that, it's just a tech demo. And it's then a tech demo you've got to support. It's a tech demo that could have insecure elements to it. So before you start investing in AI, but I believe people should be investing in AI, I just think you need to model it all correctly. Don't shortcut that product thinking process. And so we've actually put together a product thinking process around AI. So we call it product AI, and it is more of a structured way of getting to the number of, and of course as well, organizations have 101 ideas. How do you filter that down? Because you also want to go for maybe something, if it's your first, you don't want to go for the hardest thing first, frankly, because if it doesn't work out, then people just go, oh, I'm not using AI, too hard, too intimidating, lost us money. Go for something that will deliver you value, that gives you a really good return on investment that you can actually achieve.
And in terms of that business value, then obviously it's important to have the technical solution that solves that business problem, but it's also probably important at that initial stage to be able to very clearly demonstrate the business value that AI solution is going to bring. How do you go about that, demonstrating that business value?
That's a really interesting question. It will depend on if it's an internally facing or an externally facing solution.
Sure.
So things like customer satisfaction metrics, customer NPS scores, other things like other analytics around abandonment rates. You can go onto socials and start even use AI to actually start looking at sentiment analysis from your reviews on socials. There's a lot of ways externally you can actually validate is this thing working, and obviously user testing before you launch it onto an unsuspecting world. Do some user testing and start to both qualitatively and quantitatively figure out, is this going to deliver business value? Internally, it's looking at, well, what are you going to measure? So we've been running some experiments internally, and they've been very interesting. So we've actually set up some experiments where it's a number of tasks, and you do some of them with AI, some of them without AI, and then you look at the difference in time and quality. The time and quality are two good metrics, but really what you'd want to do is, if you're actually implementing this into your internal, be that engineering, be that product, be that ops or something like that, looking at what metrics. So for engineering, you might try to choose space metrics, and you'd expect that if it's been really effective, that those would improve. And for things like ops, you might be looking at reducing cycle times. It might be increasing visibility. I think it's important to set up front what you're going to be measuring and how will you tell us it's made a difference.
And that effectively becomes your main success criteria for whatever you're building.
It's also important to get the qualitative stuff as well. Mm-hmm. Do people feel like they've got more interesting work to do? Are you reducing if it's an internally facing solution, are you reducing the boilerplate and the stuff that people don't want to be doing, while allowing them more creativity, more space to interact, communicate, and build relationships, and also do the sort of the deeper work that allows you to get more from your business?
Kind of leads us on to the next question, which is touching on, so we're obviously all familiar with the concepts and the terms such as human in the loop, and you touched on there starting to talk about how we make sure that solutions they work for the people that they're supposed to serve, be that the customer or the employee or both. What would be some of the kind of key challenges you've found that you've experienced in that area when you're trying to develop AI solutions and launch AI solutions with that obviously human involvement?
So I think there's a number of strata to this. One of them is to make sure you don't disadvantage or exclude people. So you should build accessible AI. Now, hopefully, people are going to do that. Hopefully, accessibility is high on people's minds. And in fact, in some ways, hopefully, AI-based solutions might make things more accessible for people. Otherwise, I'd like to see solutions that actually make more things, websites, which can be sometimes be a little bit difficult to navigate for people with the different needs. Actually, a chat-based interface might be easier for some. So, and then Microsoft have got a really good responsible AI framework, and it's not too big, it's not too heavy, and it looks at things like making sure that when it comes to that human-computer interaction, making sure people know that first of all that they're talking to an AI or they're interacting with something that's artificially intelligent, making sure it's transparent so people don't feel afraid of it. People kind of understand what it's doing, or if it makes a decision, why it came to that decision or how it came to that decision, which can be difficult in AI because, especially with larger models, explainability is tricky. But also making it easy to invoke, making it easy to get rid of if you don't want it in the first place. Because I don't know if you've ever been on these sites where chatbots pop up and then they start bugging you every 10 seconds. Like, good grief, just let me read your website. I don't want to have
Yeah.
people sort of pinging noises and movement in my field of vision while I'm trying to use your website.
Mm-hmm.
You should make it really clear about how good your AI is and what its capabilities are. You know, be honest about it, because you know we saw that Amazon thing recently where they just walk out stores where it turns out, although Amazon refute this now, that effectively just 1,000 people sitting on CCTV.
Yeah.
Now maybe they were supplementing it, maybe the AI does work, but it does feel a little bit like kind of AI washing to me. So
Mm-hmm.
be really honest about the depth and the quality of service and what the AI can and can't do, because otherwise people might have unrealistic expectations or put too much faith in it. And it's really important to say, especially when it's around more regulated areas, like don't think critically about it. Don't take this as complete legal or financial or whatever healthcare advice. This is something that you should check. And when building something that gives out facts, it's important to include things like links off to actual source materials so people can actually validate those, because not everybody's necessarily going to do it, but you should encourage people to do so. So there's a load of different things you should put into place when you've got a human in the loop to make sure that they're not excluded, that they understand the quality of service, and that they can actually make sure that what's being presented is accurate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a little bit about security there earlier. I know you have a real interest in cybersecurity and, in fact, your own podcast on the topic. So AI obviously opens up a whole can of worms in lots of areas, but particularly when it comes to security. How would you advise businesses and business leaders to make sure that they're incorporating and implementing AI-based technologies in ways that are safe and secure?
So I think, again, it's kind of a big topic, and now I feel contractually obliged to say that my podcast is, along with my other half, Leanne Potter, head of security operations for a major retailer, Compromising Positions. So we're up for 3 awards in the European Cybersecurity Blogger Awards, which we're very excited about. So first of all is when you're building an AI solution, you start from the product, look at the product-centric threat modeling, which is something we talk a lot about, and making sure that you don't build an insecure product from scratch. And then secondly is understanding that everything it sits on has to be secure to start with. So we came up with a mnemonic for this. And the first part is making sure that your platform is secure, hasn't been compromised, won't be compromised, because it doesn't matter how good your AI is or how secure your AI is if your infrastructure that sits on it is insecure, then you've got a problem. And you should make sure it's really segregated away from other areas of the business as well. So you have to. There's different classes of attack, especially when it comes to generative AI, even discriminative AI as well. But generative AI is particularly vulnerable to them because you're opening up a non-deterministic interface to the world. So one of the problems is data poisoning. You don't want your model to end up getting poisoned by bad data being put into it. So you need to start to think about, well, how do we curate that data that's coming in? How do we make sure that it's passes a sniff test, and how can you test that the model is staying on track? The next one is very similar, but make sure your model isn't easily trickable. So you can't. There's an example recently of Chrysler and I think, but also DPD being those models being easily subverted to saying really naughty stuff or promising to sell a car for $1 and things like that. And then of course now, really, the damage there is mostly reputational. It's people take a screenshot of it and then they put it on Twitter or whatever, or X, sorry, and it makes you look like look a bit foolish, and then people have to switch the AI off, and then it all goes a bit wrong. So you don't want your AI to be trickable. You also don't want to, whatever you put into your model, there are things like model inversion attacks that allow people to sort of triangulate the training data. I saw a crazy one using facial recognition where people managed to triangulate the actual training data out of the image recognition model. So you can actually see like a reasonably good facsimile of the faces used to train some of the faces used to train the model, which is, I don't understand how mathematically they did that, but it blows my mind. So bearing in mind also, what are you putting into that model? Don't put PII into that model. If it, be careful what kind of your own IP you put in there or the proprietary data. Make sure that your actual data can't be easily stolen, because that could become, and if it is PII, then you've got a GDPR problem on your hands. Mm-hmm. And then the other part is understanding that AI systems are quite resource intensive, so you have to think about how do you actually model for throttling on that, because you don't want your entire infrastructure or your app or whatever, your platform, to be disrupted by the fact that somebody hits it too hard. How do you actually segregate that? How do you gracefully degrade and say, we can't use the AI at the moment because it's effectively down, it's overloaded? I suspect there's a lot of people putting AI into websites and apps and all kinds of things that are not thinking about that. And then that's the weak link then. You'll get attacked, your service goes down, and then you look bad. So that's some of the key things. And I think none of them, I think some of the attacks on generative are kind of new and unique, but a lot of it is just good cybersecurity fundamentals, which is unfortunately what a lot of organizations don't have.
Mm-hmm. So yes, applying those good fundamentals across the board, including to your AI components. So lots to think about there. Obviously, as well as that, AI is always advancing, is always changing along with any emerging technology. What advice would you give to business leaders who are maybe just starting their AI journey or looking to scale up their existing AI initiatives?
So I think there's a few things, and one of them would be to engage a consultancy. It doesn't need to be a big thing. We do, so here at xDesign, we do like fixed price proof of concepts and also ideation workshops, innovation spikes. We will do some training and hack days and things for clients, all relatively small investments. But the main thing is there'll be a couple of things. When we've interviewed clients or potential clients, is two things. They don't understand it and they don't have the skills. Now, the understanding you can start to build relatively quickly, and there's a lot of great courses on things like Coursera. YouTube's a vast gold mine for really good AI information. Is start building up some understanding in your business. And it doesn't necessarily need to be super deep, but start to understand what AI is and isn't. Because actually, if you look at AI from a helicopter view, then you zoom in and you go, well, hang on a second, this is actually loads of different fields, loads of different types of thing. It's not really one thing. And if you read any book on AI, they'll usually try and define it with a big caveat around going, this is really hard to define because it's many different things. So build up understanding, then start to build up actual skills in your teams. Now, the good thing about Gen AI is there are not very many true experts, unless you are working for OpenAI or Microsoft or Google or something like that, because Gen AI is only, about a year and a half, a little over a year and a half old, and it's in its kind of hype form, when it became really useful and popular. So there's not going to be anybody out there who says, I've got 15 years of experience in this. So we can build up skills and get on. It's not too late is what I'm saying. And actually start to adopt them through things like experiments, safe experiments on what you could and couldn't be doing. Again, making sure you've picked out something that has some value first. But also, I'd really encourage people to start thinking about some of the ethics around it, the ethics and safety around it. And again, there were some really good short courses around the ethics of AI, because if you're considering using AI in your business, you have to think about, well, is it right to do? Or you probably should be using in your business, but finding the right way to do it that doesn't disadvantage people, that gives people a fair experience, that adds value, that doesn't necessarily just take away jobs, and start to think of it in that way.
So look at all those learning resources that are available, but also be sort of open and mindful of the option to call in the experts if needed.
I'd say it's always worth calling in some experts from the industry. Sometimes just to get an outsider's view as well, because it's good to hear other stories of how people have used it in other industries.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned quite a few different ways of kind of finding learning information and learning resources around AI. There's obviously a huge amount of stuff out there in terms of learning, podcasts, reading, all that kind of thing. How would you kind of advise a business or a business person to manage all of that and look at how they keep up with all the information that's out there? What kind of things do you read or do you follow?
Well, I think you have to cut your cloth according to the size of the company, because obviously larger companies will have a CDO, Chief Data Officer, who might also be responsible for AI. Very large companies might actually have a Chief AI Officer. But in reality, I'd make it somebody's task to effectively stay abreast of this, make sure that they're researching this, make sure they're understanding it, make sure they're cutting through the hype, because there is a lot of hype. And there is a law that says a lot of technology is overhyped and overestimated in the short term, but underestimated in the long term. So it's good to get in on this and understand where you can use it in your business, but don't neglect it. I'd say that leverage some of the online platforms as well, because the barrier for entry for things like using Hugging Face or some of the other cloud platforms or just OpenAI, any of these, the barrier for entry is pretty low, and actually running experiments is pretty low. I think dedicating the amount of time to understanding this, actually keeping on top of what's moving in this field, because I know there's a lot of AI startups that started when ChatGPT first became public, no longer exist because the stuff they were doing has effectively been rolled into other products, by bigger providers. So I think it's really important to keep on the topic from some of the big news platforms, things like Verdict, IT Pro, the Register. A lot of these sites are keep your finger on the pulse, but also be a little bit skeptical. I know there's a lot of buzz around some of these AI assistants, these IoT AI assistants, and it's very amusing to see in the last couple of weeks people like Marcus Bramley going, you can't even review these; they're just not finished; they just don't work. So I think and the other thing is, if you're a company that is really invested in tech, making sure you have the right kind of people to do this, who have got the hunger for it. Maybe even somebody who's worked in an R&D department before. So I'm very lucky. My director of technology, he's very good at research and development, along with the team I've got working with me on AI and data. So we're always looking at trying things out, but also ready to abandon them as quickly if we think that either this is not ready or this is never going to be suitable for us. So we try a lot of things, and some things land and some things don't.
Okay, perfect. So just finally to wrap us up, could you share with us one prediction that you have for what artificial intelligence might be able to do for us, say, in 10 years' time?
So I think it's going to be incredibly integrated into maybe not even what we have now as smartphones. I think that the whole idea of smart glasses and smartwatches, smartphones, eventually this will become an ecosystem. I think we will have full real-time translation that actually works really seamlessly. We'll have these the assistants that they're promising now will be built into whatever device of the future, probably into phones or whatever those are replaced by. We will have the ability to spend less time at our keyboards and screens and more time interacting, but actually with the ability to actually accurately record that and make decisions and working in much more fluid, multimodal ways. And I don't think even maybe 10 years off. I think we're probably 5 years off that. I think it's great. you can see the seeds of all this. None of the technology is quite there yet, but I feel that this is the next step for us to have this. It's the cyber-physical convergence. AI is going to make the cyber-physical convergence accelerate, and we're going to see a lot more stuff in the real world being mixed, almost like mixed reality. I think the other thing is the metaverse will, with the investment into AI, the metaverse will become a thing. It had a bit of a false start, but the technology, the optics technology and the battery technology and stuff is improving. The processing power is improving. AI technologies are improving. The metaverse will become a very real and very interesting thing. By 10 years' time, we'll be like, do you remember the times before the metaverse? Just like you can say, do you remember times before we had smartphones? Do you remember times before we had web access? And I think it will be a real, another change in how we live.
Very cool. Another way to make people feel old when we've got people coming into the workforce that don't remember it being any different.
That's the other thing is I think in the next few years' time, not just what AI is going to do for us, but also we will have the first AI native people entering the workforce. People who are going through university, growing up in school with AI, going up to college, university, into the workforce, or whatever learning pathway they choose, into the workforce, and they'll be like, of course I'm using AI. Like, are there people who don't use AI? Like people nowadays who've never been without a smartphone, who've maybe never been without the web. We're seeing these first generations of AI natives. They might not know it yet, but they will be very soon.
So not being able to use AI will become the new not being able to save to PDF. That's great. All right. Thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing your insights and your expertise with us today. It's been really great to hear about your journey into the world of AI and incorporation into your work as a business and technology leader, and great to talk through your approach for helping organizations make sure they create that valuable AI solution that's also compatible with real life people and that is secure and safe. So thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
That concludes this episode of the AI Business Leadership Podcast. Keep an eye on our socials for more conversations with leaders in business and AI innovation. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review to let us know what topics you'd like us to explore next.